This video series for principals is brought to you by NCPAPA, NCASLD, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and Education NC. Stick around after the lesson for discussions on the topics we'll cover today. NC school leaders receive credit for watching this video. Complete the Google form linked in the description, then text engagement to 73224.
In school districts across the United States, the COVID-19 outbreak has pushed teaching and learning from the classroom to the computer practically overnight. And for some of our students that were not in districts that had one-to-one implemented or had the technology, those students were pushed to paper packets overnight. And although some schools were able to make that switch to remote learning, we know that a number of our schools have struggled to do the same. And so making that jump from in-person instruction to online has definitely been a challenge. We're asking teachers to do things they've not done in the past, and we're asking students to learn in ways that they may not have learned in the past. And so as school leaders, we must ensure that we are promoting instructional equity and preserving student well-being through COVID-19.
Hi, I'm Carrie Tolbert.
And I'm Keisha Clemens.
We know that students learn better when they're engaged. The question is, how can we keep students engaged, especially in a remote learning environment? How can we support vulnerable students? And how do we fairly assess students, especially now?
Great questions, Carrie. Today we're going to cover all of those topics. But first, let's take a look at the science around engagement. Research has shown that engaging students in active learning in and outside the classroom results in higher achievement. In addition, a positive and encouraging learning environment that fosters close relationships with classmates, teachers, and parents encourages engagement and impacts student achievement. If we know that better student engagement improves student learning, then our challenge is how to engage all students. Because of the pandemic, parents, guardians, siblings, neighbors, and other family members are all playing an unexpectedly more active role in children's educational experience. Students may be experiencing less structure, social interaction, and timely support than what they normally experience in classrooms.
This diagram illustrates how engagement by teachers, parents, and peers all impact student engagement. The theory behind this framework is that higher engagement with any of these groups will result in more student engagement. Teachers can convey a sense of caring, respect, and appreciation for their students. Peer support fulfills the need for friendship and helps children to develop a sense of satisfaction with school. And parental support can promote pro-social behavior in school and increase academic motivation.
We came up with a strategy years ago, and that is probably the best way to engage kids is to call on them by name every day. And so we've had teachers come up with some creative ways of doing that. Back in the day, you had a cup with popsicle sticks in it with the kids' names on it. But we found some interesting sort of devices that they can use. I had one teacher who used a wheel of fortune with the students' names on it and called on those kids by name. I think that obviously remote learning, the challenge is building the relationships. And if kids don't have their cameras on, how can you engage them and be sure that they are paying attention and that they are active? And so that idea of calling on kids by name has been really important. We found that to be very beneficial. Simple, but beneficial.
To be fully engaged, students have to be invested in learning in 3 ways: behaviorally, emotionally, and cognitively. Behavioral engagement involves interaction with others and participating in learning. We can measure this by looking at how often and for how long learners engage with course materials. In a virtual setting, that might be the amount of time a student spends on a learning module, their number of logins to a course site, or the percentage of assignments they've completed. Emotional engagement involves the level of connectedness and caring that learners feel in their learning community. To measure this, we can ask students about their satisfaction with the course and the instructor. Do they feel valued? We can also pay attention to how students interact with their teacher and peers, and how involved their parents are.
Let's talk about cognitive engagement, which involves how learners think about and make connections with what they are learning. We can measure this by looking at performance on assignments, interactions within threaded discussions, and the quality of interactions within a synchronous session, like a Zoom class. Informs conducted a survey of students to find out more about what keeps them engaged. The student surveys said that they prefer hands-on activities and collaborative assignments that are meaningful to them or have real-world connection.
Here are a couple of examples of lessons that engage students. Common Sense Education provides links to online lessons that connect the classroom to the real world, such as UL Explore Lab's safety engineering site that blends in-class experiments with online sims. Middle school students get to design and test solutions to actual safety problems. Teaching Tolerance provides thought-provoking classroom resources supporting diversity education to help reduce prejudice and encourage tolerance in schools and in society as a whole.
Let's review the key elements that foster student engagement and motivation. They are
greater autonomy. Autonomy is the amount of power students have to determine what they're doing and how they're doing it. Generally, more autonomy increases motivation.
Self-efficacy. This occurs when a student has the necessary skills to complete the assigned task successfully and has positive attitudes about their level of competency.
Relatedness is created when a student's actions result in developing closer relationships with teachers and classmates.
Finally, relevance. This means that students perceive the learning activities related to topics they are interested in, or that they are meaningful and the task will help them achieve short-term or long-term goals.
So what do these key elements do on a practical level? They help students boost their achievement, meet academic standards, stay engaged, and tend to their own needs. One important classroom strategy that addresses all of the elements we talked about is personalized learning.
The U.S. Department of Education wrote that personalization refers to instruction that is paced to learning needs, tailored to learning preferences, and tailored to the specific interests of different learners. In an environment that is fully personalized, the learning objectives and content, as well as the method and pace, may all vary. A student-centered instructional approach tailors learning for each student based on specific strengths, needs, interests, and goals. Student-centered instructional approaches focus on engagement in real-world activities that promote content learning,
creates opportunities for greater agency and choice-making,
uses formative assessment throughout the learning cycle,
seamlessly integrates technology into learning experiences,
and provides flexibility in resources such as time, content, groups, staff, and space.
Take a look at these examples of personalized learning.
In these cases, students take the initiative to diagnose their learning needs, form learning goals, and implement learning strategies and techniques that work for them. Sincere, straightforward communication between students and teachers is essential for this type of learning to work.
This approach gives students a lot of freedom. It's important to set clear expectations for mastery of material, especially in primarily remote learning environments. For every student, you need goals they need to achieve,
detailed information on where and how to access resources,
feedback and evaluation as each goal is completed,
timeline for completing activities,
details about grading procedures and what rubrics look like,
and policies for late or incomplete assignments.
Some parents don't want their students to come in face-to-face right now, and that has been a challenge. And so we have gone out to the homes, stood outside, got kids logged in. Not all parents are home during the day. So setting time limits that things need to be done by 3 o'clock is just not an equitable practice. I think for me, that is one major thing, especially in our community that is high poverty, and also bandwidth that they would be able to get on mass Google Meet. So I think for our teachers right now, what they are uncovering is this is probably the most they've known about student home life. They're getting that view into the students' real, their world. And I think that it is really helping the bias kind of, closing that margin so that our teachers know more about where our students are coming from. And I believe that their relationships with parents and students has really increased. But I do think for us, one thing that we had to eliminate was arbitrary time limits on assignments.
We have talked a lot about student engagement and personalized learning. Let's turn our attention to equity or fairness, which has a great effect on student engagement and achievement. As Debbie Irving states in her book, Waking Up White and Finding Myself in the Story of Race, equality means giving all students the exact same thing to meet the same expectations. Equity means holding people of differing needs to a single expectation and giving them what they need to achieve it. This means leveling the playing fields and making changes so that each student is giving what they need to succeed.
Many students lack internet access at home. Many parents and caregivers are unemployed and struggling to meet basic needs. This leaves some students to take care of themselves and maybe younger siblings. These factors can make at-home learning a challenge. Additional challenges exist for school staff and families of special needs students in providing these students with access to high-quality education during difficult times. Despite these challenges, schools are working to find ways to reach students and support families to ensure equity in education.
What determines an equitable school? The equitable school has a clear mission committed to equitable access, processes, treatment, and outcomes for all students, regardless of ethnicity, gender, disability status, gender identity, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status.
Provides an inclusive environment that teaches learners about diverse students and cultures.
Reflects and works in collaboration with the various socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, language, gender, and disability groups within the school community.
The Equitable School also works in partnership with parents and the community to enrich the curriculum.
And it has high expectations for all students and develops support and opportunities for all students.
How can you ensure equity in your school? Check in personally with students and families regularly. You may need a translator to communicate with families that don't speak English. You can also try their emergency contacts or team up with other teachers and school staff members.
You can also help students' families get connected. Students in households that don't have Wi-Fi won't be able to download work, view online materials, or attend virtual classes. While your district will have a plan in place to help connect all students, you can also advocate for your students and their families to get the access they need.
You will also need to choose tools that are mobile friendly and/or can be used offline. Make accommodations for the technical obstacles students are facing. Students may need printed learning packets or coursework. Some students may only have access to a phone at home, but no Wi-Fi or data.
During synchronous lessons, make time to help students feel connected to their learning community. Reassure them that everyone is okay. Record the lesson in case some students have technical difficulties and share it alongside other asynchronous content.
Focus on project-based learning. This can help students feel more invested in their own learning. Collaborative projects provide those who need extra enrichment a chance to go above and beyond or help struggling students.
Maintain extracurricular communities. Extracurricular leaders should continue to connect with students as they are often an important role model in a student's life. While events may be canceled, they can still find ways to remain present from a distance and encourage the work ethic and skills they helped nurture.
Partner with the community. Embrace collective responsibility by creating a team of support to address students' and families' needs and to help strengthen existing relationships and build new ones.
You cannot grade things and have the same grading expectations that you have during the regular school year. When you're in remote learning, the opportunities for remediation and students to be able to ask questions and to relearn are limited and difficult. So I think that we have to take a real look at grading practices and how we are holding students accountable.
We've talked about engagement today, and we've also talked about equity. Now let's put them together and turn our attention to assessment. Assessment provides students with an idea of their progress in a course, identifies individual strengths and weaknesses, and serves as the measure of whether students achieve the learning objectives.
While each of these is important, it's also vital that assessments engage students and prepare them with the skills they'll need in the future. We also want to keep equity concerns in mind. Our goal is to create an authentic assessment. These assessments should be used to determine student learning, development, and improvement over time.
They should also be used by teachers to adjust their practices to meet the needs of students.
Assessments should not make students feel intimidated, but rather help them to understand where they are and what they need to do to improve.
They should also not be punitive. That sends the wrong message and can cause anxiety.
Assessments should be just as diverse as the students who take them.
Designing these assessments isn't easy. In fact, keeping an eye on student growth can be one of the biggest challenges leaders and teachers face. It's even harder in a remote learning environment. Here are 4 critical elements that should be in place to ensure your school is implementing high-quality assessments.
Number 1, use multiple methods for designing high-quality student work. Demonstrate activities and tasks. Intentionally plan and design for a variety of formats for presenting and assessing information. Provide student choice and flexibility with types of assessments. Ensure all students understand the assessment and intended outcomes.
Number 2, use formative assessments to check for high-quality student work. Some examples may include daily check-ins, exit tickets, engagement versus achievement assessments, giving affirmation or ensuring student work is valued by others, and creating strategies to share student work.
Number 3, make sure they are in alignment to standards by assessing students' learning products in relationship to the established learning outcomes.
And number 4, provide feedback on students' work, particularly when working remotely. Your feedback should be consistent, timely, and descriptive.
This is important because it helps clarify what good performance looks like, encourages teacher and student dialogue about students' learning, and provides opportunities to close gaps between current and desired student performance.
We want to keep equity in mind while designing assessments too. Here are 6 guidelines from the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment. You can use these to design equity-minded assessments.
Number 1, check the biases of those conducting the assessment by asking reflective questions throughout the assessment process to address assumptions and positions of privilege.
Number 2, use multiple sources of evidence appropriate for the students being assessed and assessment effort.
Number 3, include student perspectives and take action based on those perspectives.
Number 4, increase transparency in assessment results and actions.
Number 5, ensure collected data can be meaningfully disaggregated and interrogated.
And finally, number 6, make evidence-based changes that directly address inequities.
Recentering and refocusing measurement systems and assessments on inputs will allow us to develop practices that more closely align with student needs.
Thank you for watching this webinar, and thank you for all that you do for children every day.
This has been a production of NCPAPA, the North Carolina Principals and Assistant Principals Association.
What what strategies would you share with a teacher struggling with student engagement with remote learning? Virginia, you can
So,
go ahead.
okay. Hi, everybody. But the first thing I would share, and what I've shared with my staff quite a bit, is to first get to know your families. We work with students daily. However, in the middle school, some is where it's trying to start some of the separation from the parent to the kid. In elementary, parents are very, very involved. But they start fading off a little bit in the middle school. So our first thing is to get to know your families. What are their needs? What do they have? What don't they have? How can we support them and their child in remote learning? We've had lots of conferences, Zoom conferences, of course, with parents just to provide the actual supports they need. We've actually had to have lots of scheduled office hours with different students. Some students are having anxiety with working on Zoom and being on the computer and things like that. So we've had to work through that. So find whatever interest those students have has been major for us. And if those students are interested in basketball, then we're going to make sure that we include something in relation to that. That's really helped us a lot. But just showing that you have a vested interest in what that kid and that family needs, and you will do anything to support them, and giving grace and flexibility. That's been huge for us during this entire time, just because we are all thrown into this world at this time, and none of us know what it looks like and know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 weeks, not even 6 months. So that's really how we've addressed it so far.
Great points, Virginia. And very much the same for us. To that, I would add equity of access for the students. So just as we are all different, our children, our students are all different, and we have different learning styles that need to be met in order for that child to be successful. But with this, with the COVID pandemic and being thrown so quickly into remote learning, we all had to adapt to this certain learning style very, very quickly. And so in talking with my teachers, something we're discussing a lot is equity of access. So we are a rural Title I school. And so understanding that all students may not have that equitable access to internet. And then what are we going to do in order to help them have that equitable access? And that is partnerships with the community. Internet is not even available in some areas of our district. And so partnering with local businesses and organizations to offer open internet hours so that students can use those facilities to complete assignments. Equity of access also involves knowing the student's learning style and then creating an infrastructure to support that. So for example, one thing we've done in our school is create consistency in the way the instruction is presented. So all of our teachers are using daily agendas that organize. We use Google Classroom. That is our mode of learning. And so we use daily agendas that are presented consistently across all classrooms so that when students log in, they see that consistent delivery method for the material. So in that agenda, they're able to see all of their assignments for the day, and just clear expectations for ease of access so that students who are easily distracted or overwhelmed by the remote environment see that consistency across the school, and it creates more equity of access and ease of access for the children as well. And then another tip and tool that we found for the students is, again, creating that infrastructure of access. And we did that through offering, we are actually remote and face-to-face. So our students, about half of our students are coming to school face-to-face and half are coming remote. And so what we've done is create an infrastructure of live instruction throughout the day. We have opportunities where the teachers are available for remote students in a live setting so that they can have their questions answered. Oftentimes students may access the material later at night. So we also record the lessons so that students may access them at a later time. So if their internet goes out or they have to wait for the opportunity to actually go to a facility to access the internet, that opportunity for that live instruction is still there, and we've set certain office hours where certain teachers are available at different times so that students can access an instructor or instruction, and also creating the infrastructure for our teachers so that they don't get burnt out, because when you have face-to-face all day and remote questions at night, that can become an obstacle as well. So I would say creating that infrastructure of access and accessibility that promotes learning for our children and also supports our educators as well.
Great. Thank you for sharing both of your strategies. So as we think about students remote learning, what biases in policy and practice have you found in your school that exacerbates the disparities among students, particularly as it relates to remote learning?
Much of what Michelle just stated for her first question actually relates to this question, in that equitable access to technology was huge, and the fact that in a typical remote setting, most schools want the students to be cameras on. They have the kids in the camera, and sometimes we don't take into account that that may not work for that particular family, and so we had to adjust and allow for certain situations where they don't always all have to have their cameras on. That was a huge thing. That access to technology, we have 6 counties that of students that come to our school. We're a K-12 public charter school. So if you can drive to our school, you can attend our school. And so we have some students who do not have access to internet anywhere where they live. So we had to find pods that were actually on campus, but outside of the buildings, that we allowed them to come on and use our school's campus, to be able to have access to the Wi-Fi. We also had to provide different, like as Michelle said, different businesses that actually have it so that they can attend, because for us, we felt like it was necessary for them to be able to do whatever the work was. However, they all cannot come to class in the middle of the day, because some are staying with grandparents, some have Boys and Girls Club, some don't have a schedule where they can be on from 8 to 3 in this type of environment. So we had to offer the flexibility of, okay, this assignment was given on Monday, but all assignments are due by Sunday at midnight or what have you, just because some parents only can work with their students on the weekend, or some students, are, like I said, everywhere are not necessarily home and they have to work during the weekend. That was the biggest policies that we had to adjust, because initially we thought, okay, everybody will be able to get on, everybody do what they need, but we had to constantly adjust. We have to be flexible. Every 2 to 3 weeks, we're looking back and say, what is working in our plan? What is not working in our plan? What is not equitable? And it's not something that I think we've done enough of prior to this situation here. So we just had to make sure that we modified everything to meet the family's needs. We know that all of our students don't have access to printers if they need to print something out. So we've had to accommodate for that. So it's just constantly being able to just adjust. And that's been the biggest piece for us. Remote learning is very difficult for all of our students and our parents. And we've had to really be flexible with our parents and help and give them grace and understanding, because they didn't go to school. They didn't go to school to be teachers, number one, and they never thought they would be in a situation where they're at home with their kids all day, every day. So this has been a new world for everyone. And just having that, like I said, grace and flexibility to make that happen has kind of helped some of those disparities that we've had to face with remote learning.
Great points, Virginia. Grace, mercy, flexibility, those have definitely become our buzzwords within the school. When I think about this question, something that really comes to mind is multi-tiered systems of support. So we know that we are all in the multi-tiered systems of support model, and we're offering that throughout our schools, but the remote learning layer of this adds just a whole different infrastructure requirement, a whole different need within our school. And so, speaking specifically to the academics, we had to back up a little bit with MTSS and revisit MTSS in a remote learning world. What does multi-tiered systems of support look like for remote learning, because it just added a whole different layer. And then as we backed up and looked at that, we made some tweaks to our infrastructure. As Virginia shared, students, we want students to tune in live. We want them to tune in live because they are able to communicate with that teacher and ask questions and ensure understanding. But for all students, that's not always a possibility for them. We have students who tune in and they're actually, you'll see them huddled in little corners. We've had students tuning in, from their closets because that's the only quiet space they can have in their homes. And so just understanding a true MTSS model of where are our children? We don't all start in the same place. Where are they starting? And when you're thinking about remote learning, you have to really factor in home environments. Do they even have a quiet space in the home? Do they even have their own bedroom? Or are they sleeping in a shared space? We are a one-to-one school, so our children have devices. Many children don't even have devices in the home who are learning remotely. And so each of these things became MTSS items that we needed to consider and problem solve. And so these would come to our committee and we would problem solve these, and they're very individualized. And so what was right for student A and the solution for student A may not be the solution for student B, because it's just this plethora of situations, challenges, and unique student learning needs that we had to overcome, specifically whole child learning needs. And so I think for our school, a big piece was backing up, revisiting MTSS through a remote lens, and then problem solving what we needed to problem solve in order to overcome those challenges. And that's been a powerful experience for us. One of the things that we did was to implement a remote liaison. So this person's job in our school is to follow up with students who are struggling in remote learning. So if we have a student who has contacted the teacher that day, they're having difficulty with their Chromebook, it's not working, then that teacher still has face-to-face students in front of her. So she can't stop that instruction, but the remote liaison then jumps in and contacts that student and sets up a process in order to get that Chromebook fixed or whatever the issue may be. So that's something that we did not get extra positions. We didn't hire new people. We restructured from within in order to redesignate, reassign some jobs based on those needs that we were seeing. And then I created this remote liaison position, which has been amazing in order to keep the face-to-face instruction going while also ensuring that equity and access for our remote learners.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you, your thoughts and what things you've changed to address some of these issues. Michelle kind of just touched on this in going back to her staff, but I'd like to expand on this a little further on what strategies are you using with your staff to expand equity and opportunity for students?
I think a lot of the things that we're doing has to relate to MTSS as well, because MTSS in our world, we're completely remote right now. We won't do the blended model until January. So we had to do the same thing, go back and look at and see what was the most bang for our buck. And right now we want to make sure that core is solid. And then we're also making sure that we are hitting the social emotional aspects of students. And that is the next biggest layer for us. We pride ourselves in being an academically strong school, but we now have to be sure that we're meeting the social emotional needs of our students and making sure that they have their basic needs met. And that is physically, that is mentally, and that is emotionally. So we are weekly having check-ins with our students. We're weekly having advisories with our students just to be sure that we are addressing every area. We're having surveys to our parents, surveys to our students, and then we have our teachers as well. So that, and I love the remote liaison. That's amazing, Michelle. Amazing idea. But we are utilizing our counselor to do some of those things, but oh my gosh, what would it be like if she had an additional assistance with that? Because our kids are, they're excellent students academically, but all students are not as resilient as we were as kids. So we gotta have a system in place to constantly build them up, let them see some success, make sure they have somebody in their corner. They need a person to go to when they're feeling weak. So that strategy has really helped a lot of our students, and that's our students that perform really well, and that's our students that actually struggle, because this is very different and this is not school as they know it. And so we have to make sure that those things are in place. And then again, it's just the equity discussions with our staff, making sure that we train them on what is equitable practice. A lot of our kids are masked by uniforms, and we're so used to seeing them in uniforms that we don't even realize what their life is outside of school. So in order to make sure that teachers are aware of what's happening in homes and things like that, those discussions, like the awareness is huge. If we're not aware of what's going on, then we can't address those needs. So this has really opened our eyes quite a bit. So just so that we can adjust the policies and adjust the procedures and the rules that we set in place. If our students can't access them or even understand why you're doing that, then it makes it difficult. So that's kind of where we are there, and making sure that our lens is a lens for everyone. And we're just not creating a rule for the small majority. We have to make sure that it is accessible to all.
Virginia, powerful, powerful points. The whole child experience and truly understanding where our children are, each individual child, and then meeting them where they are. And we know that all of our children don't start in the same place, but really internalizing that in order to meet them where they are. And so there's several things that we did. Number one is we changed our schedule to 90-minute blocks. We did this so that we could incorporate intervention time into every class period. So with the 90-minute blocks, we have at least 30 minutes during this class that the teacher can do small group, reteach, repractice, reassess, using those research-based interventions. And that may be with remote students who are tuning in live, or it may be with face-to-face students in the classroom. But that you can't really do that with a 45 to 50-minute block when you're talking about remote and face-to-face at the same time. And so we expanded and we changed to 90-minute blocks. And this was something that we did not take lightly. We started discussing this in the spring, and it was a team decision. Everybody had a voice in that. We weighed the pros and cons, and for a lot of reasons, we felt like that was the right thing to do. It also minimized transitions during the school day, which helps with the safety and health of all of our students who are face-to-face. So in implementing that 90-minute block, one of the things that did was free up this one spot that we needed filled, which was this remote liaison. And we were able to use a certified teacher to act as our remote liaison. So this person that when there are these emergent issues that arise, they are available to put out the fire, but also to be proactive. So when we have struggling remote learners, our remote liaison is able to immediately Google Meet with them, put out the fires, or if there's an issue with the computer, we even have to do home visits in some situations, of course, following all social distancing guidelines and current CDC guidelines, home visits, meeting in places in order to meet the needs of our remote learners. Sometimes if their technology is broken or they don't know how to access it, you have to connect with them in order to fix the problem. So changing our schedule to 90-minute blocks so that we could offer that very individualized, personalized support, not just during one time of the day, but during the entire day, during every class, we have that opportunity to intervene for our students. Implementing our remote liaison. And then the third thing is we've implemented learning on the lawn sessions. So learning on the lawn sessions are for remote learners, and we have them outside. We are a very rural school. We live about 20 minutes from our town, and transportation is a big issue for some of our students. So we actually have learning on the lawn in town at our local high school because that is much closer to the homes of many of our children. We social distance, we have stations set up, but we offer tutoring for our remote students. If they need help, if their parents need help accessing the classroom, knowing how to sign up for parental support, scheduling Google Meets for intervention purposes, not necessarily whole class, but for intervention purposes. Whatever the needs may be, we're having regular learning on the lawn sessions for our remote learners so that they can come and actually have that physical connection, again, following all the appropriate guidelines, but we're able to help our students and this is super important, help our parents to help our students. Because as Virginia mentioned earlier, our parents are not teachers. They need support and they need guidance in order to help our students. And so these learning on the lawn sessions are for them also, providing them support in what the processes are, how to access help for their children, and teaching them how to navigate Google Classroom, how to check their child's grades, and how to reach out for support when they need it. So I would say those are the three critical pieces for us that have really helped us overcome some challenges.
Awesome. Those were some wonderful best practices shared. I even personally learned quite a bit from you guys. So thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom with our webinar. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
All right, Michelle, this is for you. What changes have you made to ensure equity for all students during this time of crisis?
So I touched on several of these earlier, but the implementation of MTSS through a remote learning lens has been a critical piece for us. Backing up and looking at the multi-tiered systems of support, considering what it's going to take to truly support individual learners at home has been a powerful piece for us. In considering that multi-tiered systems of support, also looking at what motivates children. When our kids are at home and they have, all these distractions, whether it's their video games or siblings, or some don't have private spaces, how do we keep them engaged and focused and learning when they're not right there with us? And so one thing that we've done, we're trying something new with positive behavior intervention and support this year. And so we've implemented a new system, and it's for remote students and face-to-face students, because again, we're a hybrid model. And what we're doing is we're offering students points for each class, points for participation, for doing a great job with their work, for giving best effort, for, of course, being respectful and responsible and those types of things. The school has come up with specific criteria. And then we've pushed this program out. Everything is digital so that students can use their points. It's actually an online program. So we give them points through this online program. Students can access it and see how many points they have. And then they're able to purchase incentives with their points, such as a homework pass or a coupon for a McDonald's ice cream, or maybe their earbuds broke and they need new earbuds. Well, we have a student store where they can actually go online and purchase those things, and we will deliver or mail those things to them. And we also have a student suggestion box so that if there are items that kids want, that they tell us what motivates them. A middle schooler doesn't mind telling you what they will work for. And so they actually suggest things to us, and then we work on partnering with community organizations to help us support these initiatives. And for face-to-face students, it can be things like 10 minutes extended lunch, or some game time during the school day, small things that don't cost a lot of money that motivate children. Because what we have found with a lot of our remote learners is not that they can't do the activity, the lesson, whatever the content is that it's really difficult for them to get motivated outside of school. And so this is something that we came up with through our analyzing our MTSS umbrella in order to motivate our children to truly give their best. And so that has been going really, really well. Another piece has been implementing the SABRS assessment. So in looking at that whole child, SABRS is the social, academic, emotional, and behavior risk screener. This is a screener that we give to our students just to assess how they are doing whole child, not just academically, but how are they doing emotionally? How are they doing socially? And looking at the results of this survey to offer needed counseling groups. So we have morning coffee talks with the counselor, and we look at these results, and children can sign up to participate in the activities, or we will ask students to participate based on this screener results. It helps us choose relevant topics for our counseling groups or our academic support groups, so that we are choosing high needs areas, and then students can sign up. But if we see an at-risk child that needs this opportunity, then we create the opportunities for them and ask them to join the group. So that's something else. Again, all under that MTSS whole child umbrella, but motivating our students and then looking at the whole child through the SABRS screener to make sure that our whole school offerings, from counseling to academic interventions, actually meet the needs of the individual learners.
Great, thank you. Before I go into your second question, I'm going to give you a breather and switch over to Virginia, if you don't mind.
Perfect.
Okay, Virginia, your question is, what are some of the changes you have had to make to meet the expectations for high quality instruction in a remote learning environment?
So changes, I would say first, the show doesn't stop. So we really just didn't make a lot of changes. We just changed the mode in which it was delivered. Our teachers, we went from, face-to-face to doing Google Classroom, and everyone had to be consistent. So team consistency was key. We have our school is a K-12 school. So I work in the middle school. So if you have a kid in the elementary school and a kid in the middle school and they're doing something totally opposite, parents get really confused. So we wanted to make sure that everything was very consistent in the order and the agendas and how everything flowed. So that was key. First of all, that's just the structure of what the class looked like, what they were going to expect, what they would see when they got online, what would happen first, and flow in regards to assignment completion and submission. The next thing was power standards. So we knew that with the change in mode of learning, that every single standard that the teachers normally teach in a face-to-face setting wasn't going to be taught with the fidelity that we would like. So I said, please choose power standards. Each quarter, we're going to choose the power standards of what we're going to focus on, what we're going to hit hard and make sure that they have a depth of knowledge in. And so that has really helped our teachers and our families really to focus in on what those standards were going to be, what gives them the most bang for their buck. And that has really shifted. And now for math, being a math teacher myself, that kind of drove me crazy because I'm like, they need to know all of them. However, we chose what was going to be the, be the heaviest, the most solid foundation they needed for their particular grade level. So they focused on those as well. We had to go back to make sure that we were meeting all individual needs. In our MTSS layers of support as well, we have to make sure that those that they're getting their core instruction, they have a solid foundation in that. If not, what are our teachers doing to be sure to support them? And then if those that are in that has more than one layer of support, how are we supporting them as well? So teachers actually plan structured, we call it AA, academic assistance, for students to be sure that they're getting that core instruction and they truly understand what their teachers taught. So there's a lot of reteach. They may pull them in breakout rooms during their Zoom activities to be sure that they, to check in, because a lot of times everyone's nodding, but if no one checks in on you, I can keep nodding because you don't really know, you don't see my paper. So we made sure that we had small breakout rooms and things like that so they can have one-on-one discussions and make sure that our students are understanding. We use to keep kids engaged, a lot of online programs and things like Jamboard, Nearpod is used quite a bit. just to keep students constantly engaged. Because lecture, we know nobody wants to hear anyone lecturing for a full 60 minutes. So we got to keep their brains moving, keep them active, because the video games keep them, but we need to keep them. We might not move as fast as Sonic on a screen, but we can give them something to do to keep their brains rolling. So we just want to make sure that what we were offering was as solid as what we offered face to face. And teachers have to take ownership of that. And that was their main concern. I can't slack up because we're now on virtual. And I commend my teachers and I commend my students. They want to be a part of our school. They want to learn. They're like lemons. They soak it all up. So they were there. They were ready. It was unbelievable. And still is unbelievable the amount of participation that we have with students and families to keep them engaged. So we just want to make sure that we just kind of just shifted only not what we did, but just how we did it in the remote learning.
Thank you, Virginia. All right, I'm going to switch back over to Michelle. I know that these topics are kind of jumping around now via how I'm asking this, but I'm just trying to give you a breather. Michelle, my question for you is, how do you provide support for teachers to develop effective remote learning lesson plans to meet the needs of all students?
Yeah, that is a great and powerful question. And one of those things comes with infrastructure. So this summer, when we were planning for the possibilities of all the plans A, B, and C, of course, right now we are in Plan B. We have some face-to-face students, some remote students. For us, one of the things that the committees decided in our district this summer, we all came together and had a shared decision-making process. And one of the most important things that has really come out of this for the planning purposes is Wednesday is a virtual learning day for all. So we come to school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday is a cleaning disinfection day for the entire school and a planning day. That allows us to hold specific PLCs so that we can make sure we are working ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve when considering best practices in remote learning for our teachers. And it has been such a great resource to just have this chunk of time. Some of the things that we've done for the teachers also, we've implemented shared planning guides. So teachers in the same content get together every Wednesday and they plan for the following week. So they're collaborating on the standard. They're looking at that standard mastery. They're deciding what the best resources are going to be to get there. Individual teachers still have that autonomy, but they're hearing each other's ideas and working through this planning guide template that's on an online database so the whole school can see what other people are doing, which creates not only horizontal but vertical alignment as well. So the planning guides, as well as that time to plan, has been powerful. Another piece that has been powerful for us is the development of a professional development choice board. So we are expecting our kids to participate in remote learning on a daily basis. Even our face-to-face kids, like I said, are virtual on Wednesdays. So what we've done is we've tried to create professional development to mimic these opportunities for teachers as well, so they can experience on the student side in order to increase their ability to offer best practice and see things through a different lens. So our choice board is a digital choice board. It's differentiated for teachers so that there are different level of offerings. For example, the first level is Google One certification. Well, we are using Google Classroom, and those Google tools are so powerful for remote learners right now. So that's the first level. The second level has several offerings from NCPAPA. It has things from the Friday Institute. It has options for teachers. And the goal is that they're going to look at these options and choose what they need, what speaks to them, what they want to complete. And then the next level is Google Level 2 certification, which focuses in large part on Google Classroom. And so we have these tiered digital choice board. All of this PD that I'm talking about right now is online and it's self-paced. So it's not that they have to do this many this week or this many hours. It's here it is. We want you to utilize it, and we recognize teachers with badges when they complete those professional development opportunities. We actually have digital badges that they're awarded for their email signatures, as well as actual, we call them our shout out posters outside every classroom, and they actually receive a badge on that as well as they complete these professional development offerings. And this digital choice board, of course, is in addition to our normal professional learning communities in the school. And oftentimes I'll say, okay, today we're having no face-to-face PLCs. I want you to work on your choice board. I want to give you that time back to have time during the school day to be able to work on these differentiated opportunities. Teachers also have voice in the content, so they tell us what they need. We research it and find the PD, and if we can't find it, then we create it. And then we add it to the choice board so that it's truly hearing the voice of the teachers and what they need, and then creating those opportunities to grow their practice.
Great, thank you. And then I have one last question for Virginia. What strategies did you use to facilitate successful change to remote instruction in your school?
One of my mottos is that the minds of many are better than the minds of one. So one thing I like to pride myself in, and I hope my staff agrees, is that I don't make any decisions without their voice. And so I think for successful change for us has been the teacher voice in everything that we do. Everything's decided based on my team. Because I really try not to be a micromanager. I feel like I'm still a teacher. So everything that I think and do, I put myself in the mind of that position. I don't feel like I'm just a principal by title, but these are my colleagues. We work alongside one another. And that has really shifted a lot of things that happen in our school. Just because they feel like they have a voice. If something doesn't work, they feel comfortable enough to say, this will not work, and this is why. And here's my solution to that. They know I'm very solution oriented. So if you find a glitch, come back to me with a solution so that we can work through that. And so that allows them to take ownership of everything that happens in our building. And I don't feel like if I didn't allow that, and I just said, this is what's going to happen, blah, 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 that it would, they won't own it as much. They'll do it because I asked them to, because they respect me as principal, but I feel like it would be very different if they did not have that say. I will say that a lot, not a lot, because we had a lot of technology going on and a lot of teachers utilizing a lot of different things. So for us, remote learning wasn't as difficult as it was in many different schools. However, those, I don't like calling teachers dogs, but you can teach old dogs new tricks, is what they say. But those tricks help them. Like, they soaked it up. Some teachers like, well, why didn't we think of using this all the time? Like, when I come back face to face, I'm going to utilize this because I know this is what helps students and what keeps them engaged. So just having the autonomy to do what they need to do and do what's in the best interest of students has been truly beneficial. And they appreciate that. They appreciate having that voice, even down to my specialists. I used to be a former specialist, and I know the voice of a specialist wasn't heard quite a bit, but I want to go to you. I want to see what do you need? What is your voice? What do you require of us to make sure that you have what you need for students? And that has made a huge, huge difference. I think our transition was seamless. To be honest, I was thinking to my counselor yesterday, I'm so surprised how things have worked because it has been so seamless. Because I personally was stressed about it, but they weren't, because they knew what we needed to do to make the change. And it has been successful. And I'm looking forward to that Plan B success in January.
Dr. Edmonds, could you share with us how you would define equity in general, and maybe more specifically, educational equity?
Sure. So when we look at equity in education, that requires putting systems in place to ensure that every child has an equal chance for success. It requires understanding the unique challenges and barriers that are faced by individual students or by populations of students, and providing additional supports to help them overcome those barriers. While that in itself may not ensure equitable outcomes, it will certainly help us as we move forward and strive to ensure that every child has an equal opportunity for success.
If you would share with us how then you might suggest that principals address the achievement gaps that may exist and may even have been exacerbated during remote learning.
Sure. And I think one thing I'm going to preference this with is that it is not a one size, and the work that has to be done is not going to be easy work. It's going to be challenging, and it's going to take collaboration and working together. One thing is knowing where those skill gaps are. So thinking about what are pre-assessments are you going to have for your students so that you can gather that information and know where students are prior to the teaching that will take place, so that you will know what is the next level of instruction for each of the students. And so, you may have a third grader. You can't say, okay, we have a third grade class, so this is our third grade content and this is how we're moving. It's going to be looking at each individual child, which takes us to differentiated instruction. And we talk about that all the time, but this will be differentiated instruction in a true sense of each individual student, ensuring that we know where they are and where we're taking them to the next level. But doing those check-ins and that formative assessment piece along the way with that instruction that's going to be delivered, how do you know that the students are grasping that? But using those formative assessment pieces to kind of map out and to test to see how those students are doing along the way. And then another important piece will be accelerated learning opportunities for students. So once you determine where those skill gaps are, what are you going to do? What practices and strategies are going to be put into place to accelerate? So typically we're looking at a year of learning for a year of instruction. Well, once we go through COVID, and then we have on top of that, the summer slide, and we have students that may not have been in our building since March 2020. So what are we going to put into place so that we can have those accelerated learning opportunities? And then the relearning. So looking at that summative assessment piece and then relearning opportunities for our students.
So I guess then the next thing, as principals orient themselves around the things that they need to do, how would you help principals equip teachers to handle equity issues?
So one piece with that is sometimes we have to help our teachers and our staff by showing, by doing, so they can see us in that moment. And something that I've paid close attention to during COVID is the social emotional support for teachers and staff. So help our teachers to be able to help our students. And we have to know where our teachers are. If they are stressed, thinking about, well, what does this mean for me in terms of accountability and in terms of my EBOS data? So having that clear communication with your staff about what does this mean for them in terms of accountability is one thing. But I talked about the differentiated instruction in its truest sense. We may have to provide, or principals may need to think about providing professional development for teachers for that differentiated instruction. We also have to think about how do we partner with our parents in the truest sense of a partnership, and helping your teachers understand what that could look like and how it may be a little different post-COVID, because we know that we've all seen struggles. So what does the new parent engagement and partnership with our teachers look like, and how our teachers, helping them understand how do they partner with organizations that may have stood in the gap for students that were in remote learning. You may have learning pods that are going on in your community, but how do you get that information and partner with those organizations so that you know what that next level of instruction is for your students? And so helping our teachers, first having our principals really support teachers in their own social emotional well-being so that they can better support our students, but then also making sure that we have the strategies and practices in place to really move the needle on that differentiated instruction piece.
So, what are some things principals should consider when examining their school practices, whether it's school practices that are maybe grading practices, it could be practices with parents, it could be practices with other stakeholders, or any type of school practices that they have? How do they ensure equity? How, when they are looking at these practices, what should they be looking for to make sure that they are ensuring equity within their schools?
Yeah, and I think some of these pieces, so I'm going to share some of the things that we kind of hear that are common when you talk about creating equitable learning environments. And we talk about the instructional strategies and the resources that are used in the classroom, ensuring that students can see themselves in some of those resources that are being provided. Um, Looking at your data. So looking at the advanced courses and who has access to those courses and what does the student makeup of those courses look like? Your discipline policies. Are they marginalizing a certain group of students, or are they really equitable across all students? So looking at data in a deep dive, and then looking at some data that may not be the typical data. So something that we look at, being in COVID, that could also post-COVID, it being in a tier one county and students having access to college or post-secondary opportunities. Well, if we've gotten them ready academically, well, we may need to look at our scholarship dollars to see how many scholarship dollars are we bringing into the tier one counties. So not only do I have access, now I can afford it and not end my career, my college career, with a large student debt. I think we have to think very differently and more innovative about, or maybe not differently, but in addition to, what are some other things that may be happening in our schools that we have control over, that are data points that we just hadn't made those connections as of yet. And so those scholarship dollars, that is a huge one if you're in a county that's a tier one county. But then also other practices, engage in families. What does that look like? Sometimes we'll say we have PTA meetings or we have a community meeting, but are those meetings really accessible for all parents? We have a high Hispanic population in our school district, so we have Spanish speaking parents. Well, if we're having a parent meeting and we're only providing language in English, then we've just marginalized a group of people from information that they may need, that they will need for their student. So looking at how we engage families and having a welcoming environment for diverse families, making them feel comfortable when they walk into your building. How do you ensure that every family that walks into your building feels comfortable? And then motivate staff to connect with their families. And in another piece that we think about this, but the equity or inequity for our students that may be mobile, they may be transient population. How do we stay connected with them? And in the area of COVID, we have seen more of our students that are part of that homeless population. And so paying attention to that piece and getting your social workers and everyone at the table, and curating what are the resources that are in your specific district around mental health, around social emotional support for families, but curating all of those resources into one place and making those things accessible for families easily accessible for families would be huge. And so I would say there's so many things that we could think about. So collaborating with neighboring districts and connecting with people across the state, even reaching out to other states to find out what are some things and approaches that they are doing around these pieces. And you may hit something that you hadn't quite thought about.